Welcome to Herbally Yours, an adventure into the world of natural medicine. Here is your host, Dr. Ellen Kamai, the natural nurse who will help you take the leap to ultimate wellness.
Greetings, and thank you so much for joining me, Ellen Kamai, the natural nurse, for another edition of Herbally Yours, right here on the voice of Nassau Community College, 90.3 WHPC. Herbally Yours brings you the latest information about the many facets in the world of natural living. Today, I am so happy to have as our guest right here on Herbally Yours, our own Angus Towse. He's right here local in Glen Cove, and he is a horticulturist, licensed acupuncturist, licensed massage therapist, clinical herbalist, and martial art diplomat of Oriental medicine. So he has a lot of letters after his name after many years of study. Angus is also a member of the American Herbalist Guild and is on board with the American Herbalist Guild Long Island chapter, where he teaches outside herbal identification in our free monthly classes. So anyone who's listening can join in on that. Thank you so much for joining us today, Angus.
Thank you, Ellen. I'm really happy to be here.
So I really want to shout out about you, Angus, because I think you are one of the most knowledgeable people that I know, because you have such a wide breadth of deep study in so many aspects of natural medicine. What led you down that path in the first place?
Oh boy, I think, there's two things really that go into that. My mother was a nurse, and she was also a big gardener. And we moved to a very rural area in far eastern California, western Nevada, and she went to work for the local Indian tribe, Washoe tribe, and I learned my first medicinal plants from her patients. She used to take me on house calls. And so I met some very cool, very interesting folks who really knew a lot. And it got me going. And I continued basically wanting to study herbal medicine for a long time after that. My first martial arts teacher was also an acupuncturist. So that certainly had some influence. And I knew when I was about 13 that I wanted to follow the way for a living, to make that my life. And it was a very long time coming, but it's come around. My interest in Oriental medicine and herbal medicine and Western sciences has really coalesced into what is really a very broad scope of practice at this point, which makes me really happy that I have so many different ways that I can help people.
And I do want to shout out that you're local, right in Glen Cove. If you want to find Angus after today's show, best place I would say is greenmannaturalhealth.com. That's greenmannaturalhealth, all one word, .com. Would you say that's the best place to look for you, Angus?
That's definitely the place to start. You can get a look at all of my background, and it's got contact information, so you can reach out to me directly.
Now,
to give you an idea of what it is that I actually do in my practice.
Well, since you brought that up, why don't we be a pretend client? Like, let's say someone were to come, and your office is beautiful, by the way. It's a healing space just to come in there. And, in full disclosure and transparency, I've been to many events that you've hosted, herb walks that you've hosted, parties that you've hosted. You have cooked all kinds of natural tea and natural foods. You're a wildcrafting herbalist. You're like a master chef. You understand the Chinese medicine use of various plants as well as the Western. You really have some very, very unique talents.
Well, thank you. I think a lot of that really comes into our topic today. I mean, when we talk about bitters, this is a very old sort of medicine that has been used since ancient times in virtually every culture that we know of.
Well, wait, let's define bitters first, because our audience, like you and I could have a conversation about bitters, but let's catch our audience up, many of whom are not herbalists. We're going to talk today from Angus's depth of knowledge as a horticulturist and an herbalist about a concept called bitters. And he's saying beautiful bitters, greens and herbs for the healthy liver. And the spring right now is the best time to use these kinds of herbs in terms of sort of a spring cleaning.
It really is really important at this time of year. And there's good historical and practical reasons for this. During the winter months, you don't have a lot of fresh food available, and you're subsisting primarily on things that have been preserved by some method or are able to keep fresh for a long time. So there's a lot of heavy fats, there's a lot of cheese, a lot of preserved meats, which even now are not preserved with the least poisonous ingredients. There's a certain amount of pressure on the system from the kind of heavy winter diet that we still engage in for the most part. And there's an accumulation of fats and toxins in the liver, and that's what we need to move on out. And it just happens to be handy that the first things that come up out of the ground in springtime are bitter greens. Which have a really magical effect of helping to clear things out of the liver.
That's so excellent. So let's think about herbs that are called bitters. And there are a long list of them, and some are very easy to find right outside your door.
Absolutely. Right now, the dandelions are everywhere. Dandelion greens are a very traditional spring tonic bitter. Basically all over the world, because they grow all over the world. You can buy them in the store, and they're certainly a little bit bitter too. This is one of my favorite types of medicine, really. This is food medicine for the most part. I mean, there are very strong bitters that we use purely as a medicinal form, but the vast majority of the time when you're using bitters, you're using it as part of diet. And in Chinese medicine, there's 5 flavors when we talk about diet, and bitter is one of them. So besides bitter, in Oriental medicine, we talk about sweet, sour, pungent, and salty as the other 5 flavors. And I think you can safely add umami onto that as a 6th one. I'm not sure what the medicinal value of that is as yet, but I'm sure we can dig some up. And the Chinese theory is that if you combine the 5 flavors in a balanced manner, then you get a reasonably balanced, energetic diet. I also look at this, I take this a step further, and I go for 5 colors theory. So in addition to trying to combine the basic flavors, sweet, sour, pungent, bitter, and salty, I try and make sure that as I get through my day that I have something that is red, something orange, something yellow, something green, and something that's in the blue-purple spectrum. All the fancy new antioxidants, the anthocyanins, anthoxylin, those are pigments. They're plant color pigments. And you can just eat really highly colored plant material and get plenty without having to go buy fancy supplements in the store.
It's true. I always suggest for my clients that an activity they can do is bring with them empty white index cards and a pack of colored markers. And then their homework is every single thing they eat, they mark on the card with the color of that food. Oh. And the homework is to create a rainbow each day, which is like that. I'll tell you what one guy did though, Angus. Who is he fooling, me or him? He came back the next week with beautiful rainbows on every card. I said, his name was Bob. I said, Bob, that's excellent. He said, yes, I ate a box of Skittles every day.
Fruit Loops might work for that too, I suppose.
Right. It was really a good laugh. But then he got serious after that because, it's really so great what you just said. Like you're eating super excellent natural plant chemistry when you're looking at the colors.
And if you do that, you automatically get your 5 servings a day, and it's automatically beautiful. because you have this wonderful, it's not just some kind of, when you boil up a lot of stuff, all in a pot, and it's this kind of strange brown kind of color. It may taste great, but it doesn't have a lot of punch when you look at it. But if you do the color spectrum, not only do you have great nutrition, but it looks great, it tastes great, it smells fantastic when you make it. I found when I started doing it, I really enjoyed cooking a lot more, actually, because it was pretty. I know,
by
it sounds
including
silly,
all those fruits, vegetables, and colors. And I want to remind you, listeners, that you are listening to Herbally Yours right here on the voice of Nassau Community College, 90.3 WHPC. I'm Ellen Kamai, the natural nurse, and today my guest is Angus Towse, who is a horticulturist, herbalist, acupuncturist, massage therapist, and martial artist diplomat. And his office is right nearby our studios, actually, right in Glen Cove, New York. And you can find him at greenmannaturalhealth.com. And I want to thank you so much for joining me today on Herbally Yours, on the voice of Nassau Community College. So, Angus, let's talk a little bit more about dandelion, because I think almost anyone can actually identify a dandelion, and there's no poisonous lookalikes that I know of. Is that true?
Not at all. As far as I know, not at all. As long as you see it in flower, you can basically be assured that it's a dandelion. We all know what they look like. They have a really varying different types of leaf shapes and sizes. So seeing the flower is really the easiest possible way. And the thing about the dandelion is you can buy the leaves in the store, but the whole plant is in fact edible. The flower is edible. I really like to toss those onto salads, maybe after you put the dressing on, so they don't get all weighted down. They look very pretty. Right now you also have violets coming up, and violets and dandelion flowers together make a nice little addition to a meal. It really pops up the color. The leaves are certainly edible. They make a wonderful spring green in addition to salad. I use them all summer long. When they get really bitter, I balance them with the other 5 flavors, which basically means that I make a honey mustard vinaigrette and a little sprinkle of salt.
That sounds good. A dandelion salad dressing.
Yeah, and it works out perfectly. You have your bitter, and then honey is sweet, mustard is pungent, vinegar is sour, and a little sprinkle of salt gives you your 5 flavors. And when you're dealing with very, very bitter greens, that if you just ate them, you might be like, oh my God, that's so bitter. If you use the rest of the flavors, it balances it out and it makes it very pleasant.
And one thing also in terms of dandelion, because that is one of our wonderful greens, and particularly a spring green, and something almost anybody can recognize. Of course, many people, what they do is they recognize it and then they put deadly toxic chemicals on their lawn, which kills the dandelions somewhat, but it kills the people in the house faster.
We'd really rather not. I love it when a lawn becomes a wonderful little wildflower garden. Personally, I'll be honest with you. If you read the back of one of these weed killing packages, I'm going to kill everything that's on your lawn. Almost the entire list, almost every single plant on that list is either edible or medicinal, and often both. Dandelion, chickweed, purple dead nettle, what else? Plantain, what else do people hate to have in their lawns? All those are edible and or medicinal.
Right. So if they want to get more creative and understanding what God has given them in terms of food and medicine or nature or whatever you believe in, right outside your front door, right on Long Island, you can always come on a wild weed walk with the American Herbalist Guild Long Island chapter. Absolutely.
And that's I have to say, field botany is probably my favorite thing, both to do and to teach. The world is a cornucopia. And your backyard, your front yard, your entire neighborhood is full of food and medicine. If we only have the eyes to see it, the Garden of Eden is all around us. We just forgot.
And, Long Island, I actually think, has a particularly high degree of biodiversity.
It's incredible here. I've lived in 6 different states and multiple places in several. the biodiversity here on Long Island is absolutely far, far greater than anywhere else I've ever lived.
Yeah,
It's
me
one of the
too.
reasons why I live here, actually. One of the very specific reasons, that and the climate. 4 seasons, 3 months long.
So another interesting thing about dandelions is when we talk about color, there's something called the Doctrine of Signatures in plant medicine, where we know that it sort of has a signature for us about what it might be useful for. And very often that color yellow has to do with the liver, because the liver produces bile, the gallbladder actually does.
Okay.
And they talk about that in the Doctrine of Signatures, and that's a perfect fit to dandelions, bitter, greens, and liver cleansing.
Interesting. I like that. In Chinese and Oriental medicine, the color of the liver is green. And the vast majority of the practical bitters in the diet are in fact greens. So that's an interesting connection. I think it's a lovely way to help you remember what you can use the plant for. Dandelion is not the only bitter green. I mean, if you go to the grocery store, they're there in droves. Chicory, which is also a wild plant that grows very well around here and has been very widely used. Frizzy.
Oh, wait a minute. Don't just pass chicory like that, because chicory is a little bit later. It has that blue flower on it.
Yep, ragged sailors, they call them.
So I have used the root in a coffee substitute, but you're talking about using it as a green?
Absolutely. Well,
How would you do that?
Well, the greens, absolutely. You pick the leaves, and you can use the greens just as they are. Make them into a salad. Use them as a pot herb. There are cultivated forms of chicory. Frizzy, endive, radicchio. Those are all cultivated forms of chicory. Very, very different than what we find growing in the road margins around here, but essentially the same species. You're using the root, but once again, you're using it as a coffee substitute, which coffee is a bitter. Coffee and tea are definitely on the bitters lists. And the reason I think it's actually really funny, chicory being used as a coffee substitute. Nowadays, you pay extra to have chicory in your coffee. Really, quite a lot extra in some cases.
That's true. There are gourmet blends. And it was used during wartime when coffee was not in sufficient supply.
Absolutely. And during the colonial period, when Europeans first came here, using chicory as a coffee substitute was a definite sign of poverty.
Oh, you're kidding.
Exactly so reversed. A person of wealth would never serve roasted chicory mixed with their coffee. And during the colonial period, that would be very very down class. But now you can pay extra for it. And I think the reversal, over the course of 300 or 400 years is kind of interesting.
Well, we don't talk about commercial products too much, but I'm going to throw out this name because I don't even know if it's on the market anymore. But it was called Postum.
Oh, God, I love that.
Yeah, and it really is chicory root ground.
Yeah, Postum was a lovely product. I don't know if it exists anymore. That was one of my they wouldn't let me my parents wouldn't let me have coffee, but it was a lovely morning bitter. Yeah, coffee and tea, those are really common bitters, and people use them very often for the purpose of getting their digestive going and their digestive system going. And that's really what the bitters do. From a Western perspective, when you taste bitter, it stimulates the entire digestive system. It stimulates the production of saliva, which has amylase in it, which is what helps start the breakdown of carbohydrates. It stimulates the production of stomach acids and pepsin, which are what break down proteins. And it stimulates the production of bile salts, which is what breaks down fats. It also stimulates pancreatic enzymes, and also stimulates peristalsis. So it helps the intestines and the stomach move, which is really important to a lot of its functions. The most important function of bitters when we're talking about this kind of spring cleanse is its role in stimulating the gallbladder. That's important really for two reasons. One, the the bile that comes out helps us digest fat. It helps break it up and it helps move it through the system. The other one is that the liver is responsible for filtering out all non-water soluble toxins from the system. Everything that's water soluble goes out through the kidney. But everything that is not water soluble, everything that's oil and fat soluble, has to be processed by the liver. And the first thing the liver does is it breaks things into smaller pieces, and then it tries to set them up so that they're water soluble. So in phase 1 liver detoxification, the poison gets broken up. In phase 2, it gets attached to some other chemical compound that the body makes that makes it either more soluble in water, so it can be excreted through the kidneys, or less toxic so that it can be secreted into the gallbladder and stored for disposal.
And don't you think perhaps the deficit of the bitter flavor in what we'll call SAD, the standard American diet, certainly may be one of the implications in the fact that digestive difficulties are one of the most highly registered complaints?
Absolutely. And poor digestion of fats, poor digestion of carbohydrates, but also when we're talking about something like hyperlipidemia, having too much cholesterol in your bloodstream, well, and too little fiber in the diet. These are connected things, and they're directly connected to the gallbladder and how all of this works. How do you get cholesterol out of your system? It is broken down by the liver and excreted through the gallbladder. Now, if you eat something that's high in fat and low in fiber, your gallbladder will express itself. You'll be able to break down the fats, but because there's no fiber in what you've just eaten, you'll just reabsorb all the cholesterol, all the pharmaceuticals that were also being taken out, all the heavy metals, all the PBAs, and all those sorts of toxins that are broken up by the liver to be excreted. If you have a low fiber diet, you don't actually excrete most of that. It simply is reabsorbed through the small intestine. So one of the other benefits of all these bitter greens, the dandelion, the chicory, radicchio, watercress, lettuce, broccoli rabe, I particularly like that one, mustard greens, whatever it is that you like, in addition to the bitter, which stimulates the gallbladder to express itself, you have a lot of fiber, which acts as a sponge. And it soaks up all the toxins and all of the cholesterol so that it can then pass out through your system.
They have so many benefits. And I think if people feel that they don't like that taste, I personally, like you, I actually love the taste of bitters, like, golden seal root, which has berberine, it's extremely bitter. I actually like bitter foods. Many people don't because of that focus on salty and sweet only. But if you rip up little pieces of any of those things in a regular salad or even when you're cooking, it doesn't have much flavor, but yet you're still getting the energy and the benefits.
You absolutely do. It doesn't have to be a full meal of raw radicchio. I don't even want to do that. But if you use it as one part of what you're making, then it can work just fine. And there are some that aren't too bitter. Like I know Brussels sprouts are supposed to be bitter and broccoli is supposed to be bitter. I can't taste it at all. Both of those taste quite sweet to me.
Yeah, I don't taste that as bitter
either. But technically, they're bitters. And there are other ways besides the bitter grains. If you choose to get your fiber in another way, then you can use other types of bitters. You can use bitter herbs. You can use hops, chamomile. What else? Coffee and tea are bitters. Orange peel makes a very nice bitter, very helpful for digestion, strengthens the stomach.
How would somebody use an orange peel, Angus?
Honestly, you peel it, you let it dry on the windowsill, chop it up, break it up into small pieces, and make a nice cup of tea.
It's good when you dry it, and it gets almost crinkly if you dry it enough.
It does, and then you might need a mortar and pestle to break it down a little bit. But chamomile and orange peel with a little bit of rose honey make a really fabulous tea. It's very helpful for the digestive system. It'll help a lot with nausea and indigestion and the feeling like, oh, I've eaten too much and it's not going anywhere. And that's where a lot of the other kinds of bitters come in. Most people are actually pretty familiar with the other kind of bitters, which are bar bitters. Aperitifs and digestifs they're around for a reason. They've existed for hundreds of years and even thousands as part of the culture of food and drink for very specific reasons. Anything that's called an aperitif has the functions of stimulating the digestive system and making sure that you're ready for that big, heavy, fatty, delicious meal that you're about to eat.
Well, Angus, we're almost out of time, but I really want to let people know that not only are you this amazing natural chef, but in your office you see people for acupuncture, for massage therapy, and for herbal consultations.
Absolutely, and it's all integrated. And it's what people need at the time and what people want. If people don't want to have acupuncture, we don't do acupuncture. There are other methods.
And eating healthy is one of them, and taking a walk with Angus and learn the wild edible medicinal plants growing around you. I highly recommend it. And I just want to give out again your website, greenmannaturalhealth.com, and give out your office contact phone number that you'd like people to have, Angus.
Oh, sure. Absolutely. You can reach me at 516-640-2127. That's actually my cell phone as well. So if you just want to send me a message by text, you can do that as well. I've given up on the whole office phone thing. Everything just gets forwarded to my cell phone anyway.
Sounds good. And then people can make appointments and come in and, learn more about how you can take care of yourself the natural alternative way, using a lot of these natural healing modalities. People get excellent results, and you increase your self-knowledge and tune into the fabulous medicine that really grows right around us right here on Long Island. So thank you so much for being our guest today, Angus.
Thank you so much, Ellen. It's really been a pleasure.
And thank you, listeners, for tuning in to Herbally Yours, produced in the studios of 90.3 WHPC, Nassau Community College, Garden City, New York. For further information, email us at whpc@ncc.edu. This is your host, Ellen Kamai, at naturalnurse.com, inviting you to join us again next week for another edition of Herbally Yours. Until then, stay healthy.